Keith, welcome to the show. I'd like to just dive right in and talk about your background with where you started back in the 80s with, aquaponics.
Okay. Well, for you that don't know me, I am one of the founders of Fish Brew, but my background started in the fields of Western Mass, where I grew up on a farm. Came from third generation in this country farmer, soil farmer, diverse farm. We had cows, chickens, pigs, soil. We grew tobacco, cucumbers, corn, hay, a general typical diverse farm in New England. Then I decided to go to school, and I decided I was going to go to school so I wouldn't have to be a farmer. Because my father was a farmer, a part-time farmer. My grandfather was a farmer. And I decided I was going to go to school for economics and went to school for resource economics. But then accidentally stopped in a place that was doing hydroponics and aquaculture. And that was 1992, January 21st, 1992. My oldest brother was an engineer in a facility, and I had never heard of fish farming or aquaponics because aquaponics hadn't been coined yet. So I went into this facility blind and ended up working there for 6 years, building a 1 acre, 2-story greenhouse that we produced 1,800 cases of basil and 5,000 pounds of tilapia. It was one of the first commercial aquaponics systems in the country. Cut my teeth on a big building, made a lot of mistakes, learned an awful lot, killed a lot of fish, and then kind of moved around in my career. I've been lucky to travel all over the country and in different parts of the world, building aquaculture facilities, both research, flow through, pond culture, cage culture, deep ocean. Won't bore you with all the details because it was a long adventure. I met Leighton somewhere along the way, probably about 12 or 13 years ago. We met at a food conference. We had a lot in common, but one thing he was really interested in was the fish waste products that we had, or that access I had to different farms. At that time, I didn't own the farms I have now. So it was always the hunt for the better fish waste. Always doing aquaponics in most of my career and most of the farms I worked at. It was always, you could grow leafy greens, basil, lettuce, kale, but you couldn't really do much more than that with your typical aquaponics system. And as I moved through my career, I met a lot of interesting people and got the opportunity to buy a farm on Cape Cod, which is a flow-through trout hatchery built in the 1860s. One of the oldest trout hatcheries in Massachusetts. Sand bottom, beautiful water source, incredible piece of land, sits on about 8.5 acres. And my business partner and I bought that in 2015. Leighton showed up. We bought that in October of 2015. Leighton showed up in November of 2015, not too long after we bought it, and walked around the site. And the downside was we couldn't find any fish waste. Because there being sand bottom raceways in the water flow we had, you really didn't see it build up anywhere. We had a settling pond, and Leighton, I believe, sampled out of the settling pond and was quite impressed with what he found in the settling pond, but it didn't give us access to what we wanted. So in year 2, we actually built, we took down an old system and rebuilt it with tanks and used some research system knowledge. Most of my background has been in recirculating indoor aquaculture. So my partner and I built a small system that took water from the pond that had already been cleaned and filtered, ran it through a biological filter, ran it through a filter system that we put together to purposely collect the waste. Not for fish brew, just to collect the waste so we could harvest the waste and not put it back in the environment. Well, then Leighton came back out in 2016, 2017 and took another sample. And this was a different kind of waste. I had started doing some aquaponics in my 3,000 square foot greenhouse we have on site. And I was finding I could grow tomatoes, I could grow peppers, I could grow cannabis without using any other additives, which I had never seen before with fish waste in aquaponics. Fruiting vegetables were always very difficult. There was always lack of silica, boron, manganese, a lot of the potassium, a lot of the things that the fish use, just like we as people use. But what was interesting is the microbiology in it, as Leighton started finding, was the key to it. Because it was a 160 plus year old hatchery and it was sand bottom and it was silica based, we also had something called diatoms living in the water, which were amazing. So we had this plankton living in the water that produced oxygen, which fed the microorganisms in the pond as well as the rest of the farm, which made it really cool. Diatoms are also very high in silica because they're silica coated plankton. They produce oxygen. So then we started playing around, looking at it a little bit more, and Leighton was doing a lot more research than I was at the time. And then the pandemic hit, and it was time to do something to bring in more revenue because our farm went from stocking fish. So the pandemic hit in March. Our stocking season for this farm starts in March. And I went from stocking fish every single day till the end of May to having about 15 deliveries for the whole 2.5 months because everything got canceled and shut down, as it did for the rest of the world. So we had to come up with another way to figure out something. At that time, we had, just before the pandemic hit, we had decided that we were going to do something with the fish waste. We just didn't know what it was going to be. And Fish Brew came around. I had an employee working for me at one of my other farms. We also own 2 other farms. So we have an indoor trout farm in New Hampshire. We grow trout for the food market. It's an all indoor recirculating system that we designed and built. We own another facility in Turner's Falls called Great Falls, which is a large indoor barramundi farm, warm water. So all 3 farms are much different. All 3 farms have much different waste product, which was really exciting. But we also have our large farm. We have about 1 million fish on site at any given time. We have a processing room. So we were taking the waste fish, the fish that didn't make it to market, fish that came out of the processing room or left offal that came out of the processing room, and started making a hydrolysate. And the 2 of them complement each other in that the hydrolysate is a slow enzymatic process where we grind the fish, the enzymes break the fish down. We keep all the oils and fats in our hydrolysate. We don't remove any of it. We mix it, we stir it, we store it. It's a really nice 2.4.25 fertilizer, but it has all the fats and oils, which really lends well to feeding the bacteria and the microbiology. So our products complement each other. As we started going through the process of looking at this and studying it and testing it, we've tested it for, I think, about everything you can possibly test under the sun. We did a DNA shotgun blast test to find out what everything in there was, at least what percentages we had of bacteria, fungi, protozoa. We have 2 on-site biologists or 2 biologists on staff that were looking at it on a daily basis. We sent it out for NPK testing, which showed very little NPK, but a lot of microbiology. We had the Soil Food Web Lab look at it, actually a couple different Soil Food Web Labs look at it, and came back with very similar results to find out that this thing was, bugs in a jug. Not only bugs in a jug, but bugs in a jug that stayed alive. And the reason they stay alive is because we have diatoms. And the diatoms actually produce the oxygen in the bottles, which allows it not to go anaerobic. Even if it goes anaerobic, it's still a very useful product, as Leighton will talk about, I'm sure, at some point in today. But majority of the time, this stuff does not go anaerobic because it does have those diatoms in there, keep the oxygen levels up in the bottles. And we've been looking at this stuff now for almost 3 years. And the bottles we have still have activity, still have biology in them, and still have diatoms reproducing inside the bottle. So really the key to our product is the diatoms. And I think we're all in the soil world just learning what diatoms really can do for plants and soil. We're seeing some incredible results because of both the microbiology and the diatoms. So in a nutshell, and then when I have nothing better to do, I also have 2 oyster farms that are not related to Fish Brew at this time, but we're working on starting to develop some kelp projects where we can use the kelp back into the hydrolysate and potentially into some of the other Fish Brew products, because we all know how kelp has a lot of benefits to plants when used correctly.